But the first question is, last year, the government poured more than 1 billion into 19 out of the top 20 countries run by the world's most corrupt regimes, such as Syria, Sudan, Somalia, and North Korea. Tory MP Philip Davis has said, "This is a colossal waste of money. Do the panel agree, and what should we do about it?"
I think most of us, when we give charity either through our own purses or when we give it through our taxes, through government aid, I don't think we expect it to be going to prop up corrupt regimes. That's not what we think of as being overseas development, quite the opposite. And yes, it's clearly wrong. And I think this is one of the problems that we've got with the arbitrary target that the government has now set of giving 0.7% of GDP in foreign aid. It's a very arbitrary target. I've heard that there are situations when the Department for International Development is literally shoveling money out of the door to meet the target rather than to meet any specific need. And it's wrong if it goes into a corrupt government's pockets, and unfortunately, particularly with bilateral aid, which is paid directly to governments, this is what happens. Just to give you one example, there was an investigation recently by the Institute of Economic Affairs, and they found that 70% of arms in Africa had actually been financed by government aid from some country or another. And I think this is one of the problems of the 0.7% target, and it's why UKIP would cut it. I mean, it's not about stopping aid altogether, it's about cutting the budget, because I think we're paying too much. I mean, for instance, 0.7 in Britain, it's only 0.19% in America, and I think we'd all agree that America is a very generous country. Of course we're not going to stop spending on clean water, on sanitation, on alleviating poverty. The Ebola crisis, that's where our money should be going, on health initiatives, on vaccinations. It's very, very important we prioritise money for this. But things like spending £1.2 million we've spent in aid on privatising utilities in Nigeria. What's the point of that? £600,000 on children's television in Kenya, or £80,000 on gender equality studies. These are things that don't matter to people in third world countries. What matters, it matters, but not in the sense that it's spent on foreign aid in a sort of arbitrary way. What matters is alleviating their day-to-day poverty, and that's what we prioritise.
I think Peter Morgan, poverty, you say it's in corrupt countries. Question one, what is the aid being, how is aid being used to address the bad governance in countries? Question two, I don't think it's true that corrupt equals poor. Ghana's quite a poor country, but it's not a corrupt country. Population growth is a major problem with poverty. What are we doing to address population growth? For example, the population of Nigeria went up 6 times in 50 years. If population is going to grow at that rate, how are we going to address poverty? What are we doing to address population growth? Why is the aid budget increasing when other budgets are cut or held? What's the justification for actually increasing the aid? And none of the panelists have explained how they will get aid spent effectively. Zimbabwe, corrupt country, brutal dictator in charge, ruthless control. How can we help the people in Zimbabwe without helping Mugabe stay in power? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Is Trevor Davis in the audience? Yes. Thank you very much, Trevor. You asked 3 very good questions, and I'll start with the first, if I may. This is your statement. The EU is a racket that looks after its own. A true statement by Nigel Farage, especially in the context of the question, does charity begin at home? There is talk about the UK taxpayers paying towards EU pensions. Would one of the panelists like to make a comment, please? Suzanne, would you like to make a comment?
Well, I'm not going to disagree with Nigel Farage, am I? That could get me into terrible trouble. Yeah, of course it's a racket. It's an absolute racket. Over the next course of the European Parliament, we're going to be spending some 67 billion net, I think. Actually, not the next one, I think between now and 2020. I can't remember the exact figures, but it's a massive amount of money that we pay to the EU. £55 million every day. Yes, we get some of that back in terms of our rebate, but by anyone's calculations, even the most optimistic calculations, we get far less than half back. And the money really is squandered, and that to me is what a racket is. I don't know so much about pensions, I'll be honest, but I do know that the EU spent £400,000 on a fitness centre for dogs in Hungary that was, as far as we're aware, has never been built yet. It paid off debts that were incurred, private debts that were incurred by the King of Sweden, so he looked better. I don't know, perhaps Robert will know more about this than me, but I gather that Neil and Glenys Kinnock, between the two of them, when they were both working for the European Union, ended up earning some £10 million out of it by one estimate that I've seen. I mean, it's absolutely scandalous, the amount of money. And frankly, Robert, I know that it was supposed to be set up as this great political project to have peace in Europe after 2 world wars, and I'm sure at the time that was considered to be a very noble objective. But has it led to peace? No. Look at what's happening in the Ukraine. Now,
not in the European Union.
Exactly, but they want it to be in the European Union, and that's the problem. And there's no doubt that money was spent by the European Union to oppose Russia there. The civil unrests that we've seen on the streets across Europe as a result of the collapse of the euro, I don't call that peace.
Is Leanne Bruni in the audience? Thank you, Leanne. Leanne's question is, 1 in 4 children in the UK live in poverty. Bearing this in mind, shouldn't our priority be eliminating poverty in the UK as opposed to abroad? Suzanne?
Thank you. Well, let's get back to Leanne's question. It was, a quarter of children in the United Kingdom live in poverty. Should we be spending money abroad? Well, Leanne, I really don't think it's an either-or situation. I think we have responsibilities at home, but I do think we have responsibilities abroad as well. At home, at least we know where the money's going at home, so I think we should not hold back from looking to see what we can do in a very direct way to alleviate poverty. One of the ways in which UKIP wants to do this, first of all, is to make sure that all those families that are living on minimum wage are taken out of tax altogether. I think it's disgraceful that you can be working full-time every day, full-time job, just getting paid a minimum wage, and then you get a tax bill as well. I think that's an insult. If we have decided that the minimum wage is the least amount that we need to live on, why the heck should we pay tax on it? So we would definitely want to see that personal allowance threshold raised. At the moment, that would be about £13,500, and I'm sure my Liberal Democrat, Tom, would agree with that sort of aspiration as well.
I think there's a consensus on the panel almost. I'm not sure what the Labour Party position is, but so
quite
we're all in
possibly.
agreement.
That's something that's very easy that we could do to help lift children out of poverty straight away. One of the other things, and so many people now in this country too are living in fuel poverty, and that does affect children. If you're a child, how do you do your homework if you're cold? How do you sleep at night if you're cold? And we've got to look at getting fuel bills down. Now, at least £93 at the moment of every fuel bill that every family in this country gets is because of green levies, which go into things like wind farms and solar arrays, which are actually pretty inefficient forms of energy. So we would want to get rid of those as well. They're set to rise to nearly £200 per family by 2020. And that again is a very simple way that we could remove those levies and cut fuel bills. It's about the cost of living. And ultimately what UKIP is about, and I'm proud of this, is about getting more money to keep more people to get more of their money kept in their pocket. I think there is an issue too about children going hungry, and I think it's appalling that teachers, my sister's a teacher, she sees kids turning up hungry, going home hungry. We've got to sort out this problem, and I think one of the ways we could do that is giving wraparound childcare. So we have breakfast clubs, we have after school and homework clubs where children are fed as well, and that would be really something that would really benefit kids in this country, I think.
Thank you very much, Suzanne.
Oh,
Okay. It's just one thing that's bothering me about all this poverty and everything, is that a lot of rich people, and especially rich foreign investors, are just buying up all our properties in England and just raking off money from there. And that means that people who live here actually can't afford to buy their own homes and can't afford to live. And that is increasing the poverty of this country. And what good is that doing to ordinary people?
I was shocked, actually. I recently heard the Deputy Mayor of London talking in Wimbledon, where I live, talking about how wonderful it was that part of London, Queensway, I think it was, or Bayswater, was now practically owned entirely by an Arab state, and he thought this was wonderful. And he said, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could sell all of Wimbledon Broadway to India or China? And I was just completely aghast at the very idea of it. There are lots of countries now buying up apartment blocks as investment properties, and what's happening is the people who are renting those are ending up on the streets. And when I was a councillor in the London Borough of Merton, the #1 cause of homelessness was the ending of private tenancies. And I'm absolutely with you. I'm convinced that part of the problem is because we've got foreign investors buying up. They don't have the emotional and social investment in the country, and you know, the social services in this country are ending up having to pick up the pieces. It's wrong.
Is anything at all being done to stop this happening? Because it's really upsetting. I mean, it started off with people buying places in Cornwall, rich people buying places, and then local people can't afford to buy. I personally think it ought to be illegal for foreigners to buy places here until they've lived here for at least 10 years. And I think that people shouldn't be able to just buy second homes and just rent them out. I don't believe in property for investment, because it's making people homeless. It's just not fair. And I'm going to buy that flat as well, and I'm going to buy that flat, and I'm going to buy that flat, and so other people can't get them because the price goes up so much. Are you going to stop that? How? Oh.
The question is from Raj Sood, and the question is, when will the government and the Labour Party listen to its 70 million citizens? Can the traditional parties not understand that we're simply fed up with foreign aid policy and the cuts that affect us here? When will you hear us? After the next coalition of UKIP and the Greens?
I certainly sense on the doorstep when I'm out campaigning that people are fed up with traditional parties. Yes, I think people see them as being all the same, and I think in many parts that is very much true. Fewer and fewer members of Parliament now have had real jobs. Many have been researchers for members of Parliament before becoming MPs themselves. They often go into politics straight out of school. And I think people in UKIP buck the trend. The people that I meet in UKIP who are standing for Parliament are very much like me. They're people that went into politics later in life, that had had a huge amount of life experience under their belt, both in terms of education, in terms of actually being in a workplace. I've run my own businesses. I've helped set up several other businesses. I've set up a charity. And I think what the people of Britain want is some common sense. They get fed up with spin. Get fed up with you know, political infighting, the Punch and Judy politics, and I think we are offering the public something very different, and I think that's why they're voting for us.